Welcome back. Okay, so this is Azriel. How you doing, sweetie? So tonight I watched Dynamite, and I'm going to review it. And before anybody says anything about why isn't he reviewing WWE, he needs to review WWE. I tried. I tried with SmackDown. I tried with Raw. WWE has kind of gone back into, I don't know, the last couple of weeks it's felt like it started falling back into some habits that it had before under Vince, and so the surprises have kind of petered out, which is one thing. It's fine. You don't have to have a bunch of surprises to have a good show. But we're getting back into some rematches. There's still some good stuff going on. I'm not going to argue that it's gone back exactly how it was with Vince, but there's a lot of backstage segments, a lot of interview stuff that it's hard for me to review. So while I love the Solo Sikoa stuff and the Bloodline stuff and whatnot, I don't know. It's harder to watch an entire WWE program than AEW, and I think it's because I'm an old school wrestling fan. I like the wrestling. I'm not a big fan of all the drama. I'm not a big fan of just some of the stuff that goes on in wrestling that I know is standard wrestling stuff now, but like there's too many commercial breaks, there's too many segments, there's too many backstage things going on. It just makes it tougher for me to watch and sit through. So, that out of the way, let us talk about tonight's episode of Dynamite. So, of course, it was Grand Slam tonight from Arthur Ashe, and they brought it tonight. This was a huge card. Now, if there's a complaint I would lobby at AEW right now, it is still there are too many titles. And we'll start with the first match of the night, which was the ROH World Title. ROH was a program that 10 years ago I was watching pretty much religiously. I absolutely loved ROH. I loved everything about it for a lot of the same reasons I love AEW. It was pure wrestling. There wasn't a lot of the drama and the backstage stuff. It was basically just you settle it in the ring, right? And there were some drawn out storylines, but in general they would play out over a 3 to 4 week period and you move on, right? Which sometimes, and AEW does this too, but sometimes with WWE there's feuds that get drawn out that shouldn't, and then feuds that end in a week or two that shouldn't. And anyways, WWE doing pretty good. AEW, I thought right out of the gate had it right. So it was Chris Jericho against Claudio Castagnoli, and Jericho is very good at putting on a first match, right? And he's in better shape now than he was, say, 6 months ago. He's talked about that too, and how a doctor told him he had to lose weight, so he did. And I thought this was a good match. Jericho ends up winning it. It was a low blow that helped him get the advantage that gets the victory. I'm going to give this a star rating. I gave all the matches star ratings tonight because why not? I give it a 3.5. I didn't think it felt like a world title match, which again is just purely subjective. If you felt like, hey, this is a world title match, great, perfect, fantastic, and awesome. So no problem. But again, for me, it was just kind of there, and I felt bad for Claudio, who used to be known as Cesaro in WWE, but of course he was Claudio Castagnoli before that. So I felt bad for him because he had a world title run that felt kind of anticlimactic to me, and now it's over. So I'd like to see a feud between Jericho and Claudio, but it feels like they're setting up Jericho versus Daniel Garcia. Garcia was there to kind of congratulate him on the title win. If a friend of mine came out and congratulated me like that, I'd be like, what is your problem? Why aren't you congratulating me with a little more, I don't know, oomph or maybe a smile on your face or something? So that's still, a slow burn there, and I do like that storyline. I think Daniel Garcia is going to be a big star in the industry, and I say that as somebody the first couple times I saw him, I was not a big fan of him. But it was a good match. Like I said, 3.5 stars is what I would give it. And then we had Swerve in Our Glory against The Acclaimed. The Acclaimed had to win this, right? Now, there's been talk about AEW ditching the ranking system. I will say this. AEW in recent months has been acting like a company that doesn't have a ranking system, which is okay. I don't think the rankings ended up being as important as they had intended. And once you make it look like the rankings don't matter very much, where the person getting the title shot is a third or a number 4 contender, that's a problem. So, and I say that because what's the point of having that ranking system if the guy who's 4th or 5th or 6th on the chart is getting that title shot? So Yeah, we had the Acclaimed end up winning the tag titles. They are so over. The crowd went absolutely crazy. The whole Billy Gunn thing is over too. I don't know how. I don't know how Scissor Me Daddy got over, but it feels like an Attitude Era thing. It really does. It really feels like AEW has kind of gone into the WWE Attitude Era with some of the stuff they're doing, and this works. So putting the titles on the Acclaimed makes a lot of sense. They can now fight FTR. That match will be absolutely bonkers. And of course, FTR was backstage, and they had a little thing with the Ass Boys. And I know that's not the title they want to go by, but that's what we all know them by, right? So Billy Gunn's kids. And while I know there's people who don't think that Billy Gunn's kids deserve the time on Dynamite, they don't think they're very good, it's a good storyline thing to have them still in the mix as FTR's foil, and then of course they're going to be trying to screw over the Acclaimed at some point. What I like too was that there are seeds there in the loss by Keith Lee and Swerve Strickland that will allow them to break up and naturally move into a feud with each other. Here, kitty, I'll move that for you. Maple's trying to find a place to lay down, and there's a book of mine that's right in the way, so I'm just moving that. There you go. Now she can lay down. Right next to Shadow. But, yeah, I think now we can get the Swerve versus Keith Lee storyline going, because obviously that's where it was going months ago, and then they decided not to, which I agree with. I think they were good tag champs. But now it's the Acclaimed, and they are so over, and that crowd reaction was fantastic. And I think it's important to keep in mind that for people who say, well, you know, AEW is not going to make it, and they're not very big, and they're not very popular, watch this show, look at the size of that crowd, and listen to that crowd. Amongst AEW fans, things are pretty good right now. It doesn't matter what WWE's doing in terms of numbers. I don't care. AEW looks very healthy and strong, and this roster is dialed in. Then we had MJF interview. Well, Wheeler Yuta's being interviewed, and out comes MJF, and of course the crowd loves him, and they seem to be leaning into this now. MJF didn't even try to get the crowd to go against him tonight. I don't think it would have worked anyways. And then, of course, W. Morrissey comes out. And the interesting thing, too, was that MJF knocks down Tony Schiavone. And, of course, Yuta gets knocked out. And whenever I see that, I think, you know, he must be the least popular person in the Blackpool Combat Club because nobody's coming out to help him. Nobody. I understand that Moxley and Daniel Bryan were getting... Bryan Danielson, sorry, that's a slip. Bryan Danielson. And that was his name before Daniel Bryan. But I understand that Danielson and Mox were getting ready for the world title match against each other, but you can still come out and make a save. So he's not very popular in Blackpool Combat Club. And honestly, they could play that up as a storyline. You could have Yuta go out next week and say, hey guys, so I got attacked by W. Morrissey as well as MJF. What's the deal? Why didn't anybody help me? Am I in or not in this stable? So I thought it was good, and of course, MJF takes a personal shot at William Regal in there, which obviously is scripted, but he's got to get that thing in. He's got to have something in his promo or something in his interruption, something there where he's attacking them about something that's not actually kayfabe wrestling, which means they're riding that line. And MJF's doing great. He has knocked this out of the park. I think he realizes, hey, Punk's out. Omega's been suspended. We don't know when he's coming back. I can take the ball and I can run with it. He's doing very, very well for himself. Then we had the All-Atlantic Championship defended by Pac against Orange Cassidy. And this was really well done. And it shows that Pac is good at wrestling against guys like an Orange Cassidy. Cassidy's not really a serious wrestler, but, you know, it works with Pac. That Pac is this, he's the bastard Pac, and it works. The two of them had very good chemistry. I was more entertained by the match than I had expected. I think Orange Cassidy has proven over the last few years that he's more than just, you know, the weird thumbs up and the little kicks that shouldn't do anything kind of thing, right? That he's more than just that gimmick. It's the gimmick gets him in the door, and his ability to wrestle is what keeps him there. So I thought it was a really good match. Obviously, Pac was going to win and keep the belt. You can't have every belt change hands. And I thought it was really well done. It was a hammer shot by Pac that won the match as well. And I like that. So it's the hammer they use for ringing the bell. I haven't seen a wrestler use the hammer that rings the bell in a long time. I was like, that's old-fashioned. That's old school wrestling right there. Used to see that, I'm not going to say often, but I remember the ring bell in particular being used in the feud between Macho Man Randy Savage and Ricky Steamboat. and how everybody was horrified at Ricky Steamboat taking the shot to the throat with the ring bell, and it made you hate Savage, and it led up to the best WrestleMania match ever. So Pac using the hammer, I thought was nice. It was, and again, I've seen wrestlers use that before, and it worked. You know, he wins the match. And if he'd gotten disqualified, he still would have kept the title. So I will give that match 4 stars. The Acclaimed winning the titles, 4.5. I thought it was a 4.5 star. I thought I could give it 5, but we'll hold off on the 5 stars. That's more for the big pay-per-views kind of thing. So after that, we have the women's match. Toni Storm, Serena Deeb, Athena, Britt Baker, all in a match against each other. When did Britt Baker get her nose broken? At some point in the match, Britt Baker's in the corner. Her nose is bleeding. Again. Nose breaks are an odd thing. And I actually got a kick out of the announcer saying, that's the nose that got broken in the match against Hikaru Shida. And I said out loud, well, she only has one nose, so yeah, that would be the one that got broken in that match. It's an excellent observation. I know what they meant. But I thought it was funny the way that they said it. But yeah, so I think she's got a broken nose. She stayed in there, and of course she did what Britt does. You get the blood all over your face a little bit to make you look a little bit tougher. And she's right. You know, it's a wrestling thing too. That's old school as well. And so after the match, Toni retains the title. Britt jumps her. Out comes Jamie Hayter. And as soon as Jamie Hayter came out, I'm like, okay, so you've got this situation where Hayter could turn face. It doesn't suit Jamie Hayter to be a face. Like, as much as we all love Jamie Hayter and we would like to see her have a title run, being a face wouldn't really suit her character. It doesn't suit her at all. So they attack Toni. And so then, you know, you got Athena down outside the ring. And then music starts up. Now, this is always where it's interesting. Because they don't bring over their music from WWE. Most of them don't. I do see Bryan Danielson, and I do remember CM Punk coming out to Cult of Personality. But because she didn't come out to her own music, nobody knew who was really coming out. I mean, we had some idea. And then you see Saraya up there. Out comes the former page of WWE. Saraya is her real name. And, yeah, she came out to the ring. She did the whole yelling, "This is my house." The heels clear out. I hope that if Paige has been cleared, that she's good. One thing with Paige that was said about her when she got hurt and had to retire was that if she landed on her neck again, she could be paralyzed. Very similar to the advice that was given to Nikki Bella. That Nikki Bella couldn't wrestle anymore either. She couldn't take a bump. So I really hope they've done due diligence and that Paige/Saraya can wrestle, because that crowd went crazy. That was a loud pop for her, and rightfully so. She's a very good wrestler. She's an excellent character as well. She's good on the microphone. Honestly, adding her to the women's division could be exactly what it needs. And if they let the women's division shine, which means more than one match a week on Dynamite, which means giving them some time, allowing feuds to actually, you know, to actually create feuds that work. Like, okay, Diamante is fighting on Rampage against Jade Cargill. Fine, but Diamante just ate a pin from Sky Blue last week on Dark. So I think about that and I'm like, wait a minute. Shouldn't Sky Blue be the one that's coming in and putting in the challenge to Jade Cargill? This is odd. I understand Diamante is an older wrestler than her. She's more experienced and can probably have a better match with Jade. But I just thought from a storyline perspective, it was odd that it's Diamante coming out, who I've watched on Dark, you know, just kind of getting her way through things and not feeling like she was a real threat. So that's important. If Jade's going to continue this run, that's great. But you need somebody who's in there, somebody in there who's a threat as well. I do find it weird, too, that Jade Cargill never wrestles on Dynamite. Because, of course, if you let her wrestle on Dynamite, well, now Toni Storm can't, because reasons, I guess. I'm also baffled as to why Jade hasn't challenged for the women's world title. Why she hasn't looked at her title and said, this is a nice belt. You know what I really want? I want that one Toni Storm has. I'm waiting for that. Like, I'm waiting for her to make that statement and then give her the belt. See how far you can take this undefeated streak. Because Jade is a superstar in the making, and it just feels like they handicap the women's division and make it far more difficult for them because they don't have the time on TV. People complain about the women's division, rightfully so. They do not have the time. So if you're not going to have the time for them, why do you keep going out and signing more and more and more women when you don't have enough TV time for them? So hopefully by introducing Saraya, maybe it'll have the same effect that bringing up the 4 horsewomen did for WWE, where they finally had to stop calling them divas. And they had to start giving them ice time. Hockey just got in there, but they have to start giving them TV time, right? So anyways, rant over. I'll get off my soapbox. I should have got up on the box. Why didn't I get up on the box? Yeah, it was a 3.5 star match for me. That one, I didn't really like that it was one with a roll up. I thought there were parts of it that seemed kind of rushed because, again, I didn't think they were given enough time for what the women's title match should have been. The main event, Moxley versus Danielson. This is your 5-star match. It's just perfect back and forth. The crowd wasn't as into it, at least from what I saw on TV, and I think that's because both of them are face wrestlers. It is very difficult to get a crowd into it when it's a face versus a face or a heel against a heel. The first time I ever saw that on TV would have been Jake the Snake Roberts against Randy Savage. And I remember that because both of them went into the match as heels, and the crowd rooted for Jake Roberts because Randy Savage was so easy to hate. And then Jake the Snake Roberts made a face turn coming out of that. But as great a match as they had, and as much as they were able to get the crowd into it, I think it said a lot about Jake Roberts and Randy Savage and what they were able to do for the crowd. Now, in this case, it just felt like there was a lot of move for move. There was a lot of really good counters. There was a lot of good stuff. The wrestling itself, to me, is 5 stars, but the crowd wasn't as into it. And then Moxley ends up winning, which kind of surprised me because Danielson was the favorite to win it. And they did make a big deal before the match about how Danielson's never beaten Moxley. And I thought, okay, so they might be telegraphing it here. But in the end, it's Moxley that wins, gets the belt back, which is good because he probably shouldn't have lost it to CM Punk in the first place. I think that was their first mistake. And I understand it was in Chicago. I know Chicago could have rioted if he didn't win it, but just, if they'd had Moxley for that press conference after, we aren't dealing with all this crap. Anyways, which in some ways has been the best thing that's ever happened to AEW. Remember back, Brett screwed Brett was the best thing that ever happened to WWE, because that really had people going, wait a minute, what kind of car wreck is going on in Raw right now? So Brett just leaves and they screwed him out of the title, and I got to see what goes on after that. So it can work, and you can keep that audience, but you have to keep them coming back. And I think this was a very good match. MJF was in the crowd holding on to his chip. He, of course, has the AEW version of the Money in the Bank. And I say keep it. I don't think it's a big deal. I know it's seen as ripping off WWE on some level. I'm fine with it, though, because of the way they're doing it. And I think it's good. And I think it's good that MJF didn't cash in, because that was the speculation today as well, that he might cash in and he's going to end up being the title holder at the end of the night. And I remember thinking to myself, you can't just have Moxley or Brian Danielson win the title and then 2 minutes later lose it to Moxley. You can't do that. You have to have some kind of stability, and you have to build a feud. So now we get Moxley on one side, MJF on the other, and the winners, us as fans. It's going to be great. But of course, we'll likely be seeing Malachi Black back in WWE. That's one rumor that's out there. I find it funny too that people would be like, why would he go back there? Well, his wife's there. So it makes sense that he would be like, all right, well, this isn't working in AEW. I want to go back and hang out with my wife. Makes total sense to me. But if you watch the show, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. As always, don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.